You are sitting in Bethel A.M.E. Church. It is October 29th, 1978, a Sunday evening. Through the tall windows, autumn light falls across the pews where hundreds of Detroiters are finding their seats. There's a traffic jam outside. So many people want to be here that cars are lined up around the block. Something is about to happen that has never happened before. In the front of the sanctuary, where the pulpit usually stands, 90 musicians of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra are arranging their chairs and music stands. Behind them, a chorus of 75 voices, the Brazeal Dennard Chorale, joined by singers from 26 black churches across the city. Sopranos in pearls, tenors and basses in white shirts and bow ties. Everyone dressed for the occasion.
When I approached the church, I remember thinking, where are all of these people going to go? Because there was a traffic jam. Coming into the church and seeing the orchestra with all of the setup. I was not involved in the development of the program or in the setup of the orchestra. So this was a first impression kind of thing when I walked into the church. And I thought, my, they pulled it off. That was my first thought. The feeling that we actually pulled this off and it's going to be fantastic.
This is Classical Roots, the first concert of what would become a beloved Detroit tradition spanning nearly 5 decades. But to understand why this evening matters, why ministers are jockeying for special seats, why singers auditioned fiercely for a spot in that choir, you have to understand what brought everyone to this moment. 6 years earlier, in 1972, a music educator named Brazeal Dennard founded a chorale that would bear his name. His mission? To preserve the spiritual music of the African American experience. Dr. Dennard was no ordinary choir director. He led the vocal program at Northwestern High School, where his students won competition after competition. He also served as president of the National Association of Negro Musicians, Incorporated. The music critic for the Michigan Chronicle called him one of Detroit's favorite sons.
I happened to be one of Brazeal's students for private lessons. I recall that his involvement in various projects somehow included me as part of that support team. So if he took on a particular challenge, he said, Wayne, I want you to meet me at such and such a place, because this is what we must do next.
It was his wife, Murtis, who gave him the idea of starting a community choir and calling it the Brazeal Dennard Chorale. And I was on board. I was one of the first members to be a part of that wonderful organization when they started. He was an innovator. He would take on whatever he thought ought be done musically and do it very well.
He was more than just a teacher. He was a teacher initially and became a very dear friend. I recall that at one lesson, we talked about not so much the music we were going to review, but his record collection. And my first recording from Brazeal Dennard, when he knew that I was had an interest in pursuing a career in arts management, it was a recording by George Sell of the Brahms 4 symphonies. And I still have that collection.
Around the same time Dennard was building his chorale, a young conductor named Paul Freeman arrived at the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. Freeman had just made a startling discovery. Black music? Of course. The blues, spirituals, and all that jazz. Freeman would later tell the New York Times. He thought he knew all about it. Then, at a symposium in Atlanta, he encountered symphonic works by black composers spanning 3 centuries, and it changed everything. As he put it, the quality of these pieces so impressed me that I decided to search for music by lesser-known blacks from earlier periods as well as this century. He called it, for him, a revelation. Freeman launched the Black Composers Series for Columbia Records, 9 volumes documenting over 2 centuries of classical music by black composers. The Detroit Symphony played a central role, alongside the London Symphony, Baltimore Symphony, and New York Philharmonic. But Freeman wanted more than recording. He wanted something that would connect the orchestra to its community in a deeper way.
Paul Freeman, who was appointed to the Detroit Symphony Orchestra as its conductor in residence in 1973. It was the same year that I began with the Detroit Symphony as administrative assistant. So as it turns out, when we think about how the orchestra could affirm its commitment to the community, that's where we started the process of exploring ways in which we might work together.
A small committee began to meet. Brazeal Dennard, Paul Freeman, Wayne Brown, Beverly Thomas. Community leaders like Khadijah Shelby. They weren't planning a single concert. They were imagining a movement.
It was less about the title and more about the movement. And Classical Roots provided that opportunity to strengthen, enhance, expand that connection between orchestra and its community.
It never should have been perceived as an opportunity to begin to develop African American musicians. We've always been here. It was the idea of being recognized and given a platform that would allow us to share with the entire Detroit community as opposed to a small unit of friends that knew other friends who knew other friends who were musicians or artists.
The name Classical Roots came from Khadijah Shelby, inspired by Alex Haley's television series Roots, which had captivated the nation just a year before. And the location, that was deliberate too.
Conscious decision not to present the program in Fort Detroit. We wanted to make a community statement. And what better way to do so than to look at the role of the churches in Detroit?
Many of the sanctuaries where we worshiped as African Americans, they were sanctuaries that we moved into, or church buildings that we moved into that had been previously occupied by another denomination. But when Bethel Church built this edifice, it was, as they say, from the ground up. And we were excited that this was a church that would not only serve the community, but it would be a beautiful recognition of the ability to grow and to soar.
Bethel not only provided the acoustical level of satisfaction, and its location was a central aspect of where we wanted to unveil this initiative.
To fill the choir, they invited churches across Detroit to send their best singers. Quartets from each congregation would audition for a spot alongside the Brazeal Dennard Chorale.
I remember vividly, most choirs have more sopranos than any other voice. And one of the members in the soprano section said, well, I want to be in it too. She said, well, we already have more sopranos than we can use. We need more tenors, we need more basses. And it was that kind of thing. I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of it.
There's a certain rivalry underway there that took place. And in fact, I recall receiving telephone calls. I didn't make the audition. Can I still get in? So we had a finite number of choristers who could participate. And therefore, it made the audition process very essential.
And so we arrive at this evening, October 29th, 1978. The sanctuary is full. Ministers in their finest robes, community leaders, families from across Detroit, support from Mayor Coleman Young. The Reverend Maurice Higginbotham, Bethel's minister, welcomes everyone into his church. Reverend F. Rixford Myers offers an opening prayer.
Almighty God, Father of us all, we thank Thee for this juncture, for him who conceived and engineered this project with remarkable, efficient cooperation of his fellow workers and lovers of music, who beyond their accustomed precedent have at this time become a viable ministry of this covenant art.
Then, Maestro Paul Freeman raises his baton. The program opens with Lift Every Voice and Sing, the hymn often called the Black National Anthem, composed by J. Rosamond Johnson. 75 voices, 90 instruments. The sound fills every corner of the sanctuary.
I cried when we were singing Lift Every Voice and Sing, that great sense of pride that the effort that the entire community pulled together to make something happen was just so affirming.
When we were singing Lift Every Voice and Sing, it has a beauty of its own because it tells a story. But that third stanza, God of our weary years, and I looked around and saw all of the people here, and it was an audience that represented diversity, but it had a special meaning to me as an African American to know those weary years, and know those silent tears. It really, really brought chills and maybe tears too.
The program continues with Dvorak's New World Symphony, chosen not only for its familiarity, but for its connection to spirituals, to the music Dvorak discovered during his time in America. Then William Grant Still's Scherzo from the Afro-American Symphony, the first symphony by a black composer to be performed by a major American orchestra.
So one of the works that the orchestra was quite familiar over time was Dvorak's New World Symphony. Mm-hmm. And we also thought that the New World Symphony was so relevant to what, in other words, the inspiration that Dvorak experienced during Spillville, and how he, during his time in the U.S., was really quite inspired. And when we think about that second movement relative to going home, we felt that was just such a appropriate connection with the program that we had in mind.
And then the finale, 75 voices and 90 instruments joined together for the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
It has a very full chord, but it makes everyone want to stand up and give you an ovation.
It was fitting, and it worked.
It was a jubilant atmosphere. There was not an encore, but there were standing ovations. There was handshaking, there was hugging, friends who hadn't seen each other in years, choristers high-fiving, churches congratulating each other. It was not just applaud and go home.
The general feeling was a joy and pride, and thinking that we ought to do more of this. This should not be a one-time thing.
We were trying to make a community occasion, and the community occasion could be enhanced musically.
That community occasion became a tradition. Classical Roots returned the next year and the year after that. It moved to Orchestra Hall in 1981, where it continues to this day. Wayne Brown carried the model to orchestras in Springfield, Massachusetts, and Louisville, Kentucky. The program expanded to include composer residencies, artist fellowships, and educational outreach, reaching hundreds of thousands of people each year. But it all began here, in this sanctuary, on a Sunday evening in October 1978, when a city came together to celebrate something that had always been there. Music that told the story of a people, performed at the highest level in the heart of the community.
The preservation of this moment is just important, and I want to be a part of it for as long as I can.
I'm delighted that we had such a strong beginning and that it continues to be a priority for the community.
You are sitting in Bethel A.M.E. Church. The light through the windows has grown dark. The audience is rising, lingering, reluctant to leave. And somewhere in the sanctuary, a small group is already planning next year.